This is the tutorial for the Art 159 product brochure, interior spreads. So in this tutorial we are going to look at the two facing pages that are going to be on the interior of your product brochure featuring your product within the space. So we talked about in the lecture how you are going to create those rectangular frame boxes to place your images. We can see that starting here on the first page where we have these three different columns that are placed within the margins, and we have three different levels of typographic hierarchy here. So I'm going to move down to this space here and kind of recreate what it is that we're working with. So again, the first thing you should do, if you have not done so already, is create some guides within the space. And erase these text boxes here. In order to do that, we are going to come up here to Layout and go to Create Guides. And this will allow you to create the amount of columns and rows within the space if you wanted to include rows as well. You can preview that here, and you can set the gutter size as well. The important thing here is to make sure that you are fitting your guides to your margins, not to the page, so that those are going to be consistent within your live area. Now for this one here, I'm going to go ahead and use 3 columns, and I'm going to use 0 rows for the time being. Go ahead and hit OK. Now, when you are using your rectangular frame tool, make sure you are creating those frames within your grid. So you don't want that to go past your gutter here unless it's going to go all the way into the next column. If you wanted that to be placed within these 2 different columns, you can space that accordingly. If you wanted something to bleed all the way off of the page, then you should have that go all the way to your bleed lines. And once you have positioned where you want that text frame, then you can either import the file down here with your quick actions in the properties, or you can go to File and Place and locate the image that you are trying to place inside there. Now in some cases, your image might be larger than your actual frame, something like this here, when you place that inside. So if that is the case, once you have placed that inside, you can always select back to that frame, and you can go to your frame fitting options. So fill frame proportionately or the fit content proportionately. These will all keep the image in a proportionate image sizing while still fitting to your frame. And of course you can always resize this by clicking on your white arrow tool and positioning this how you want within the space. I'm just going to kind of move this over a little bit. Now this is an area where I'm actually breaking the grid here a little bit, where my image is going above the margins. But in this case here, that's okay. There's not that much information. It's not going all the way to the edge of the page, and it kind of creates a little bit more of this dynamic look for the space. Now you'll also notice that I have an isolated image down here that is also breaking the grid. We have that kind of placed within the space here. We can see that this is going all the way to the bleed lines and kind of nestled into the corner here. We're going to use a text wrap on this box once we get there. But let's look at our 3 levels of hierarchy first. So the headers are going to be the largest areas of text, and this is where you actually want real text inside the space. So here I have field and music. If I go ahead and select on this, and again, just to back up a little bit, you can use the type tool to create these text boxes and type out what you need within the space. If I was going to recreate this, I would use all capitals. And then, I'm going to erase that one. And then I'm going to go ahead and select a typeface here that I'm going to use throughout my entire system. So again, when you're selecting a typeface, make sure that you're choosing something that has multiple options. I'm going to use Helvetica New here. Oops, got that wrong. Helvetica New, and I'm going to use the condensed black for this top one here, but you can see that within the Helvetica New typeface I have multiple options to use, and this will help me out within my hierarchy. So I'm going to go ahead and select that text again. I'm going to increase the size of this. Coming over to my character formatting here, I can increase the size of my text by knocking that up in the points. I can adjust my leading, which in this case I only have 1 line of text, so that's not going to be very obvious. But I can also adjust my tracking here, which kicks out those letters a little bit further and creates a little bit more space. Now, in addition to that, I can also change the color of the appearance of my fill of the text. Up here, if I click on this color key here, I can actually go into the actual color. Sometimes the default for that is only black. So if you need to see all of your CMYK options, you can click on the options up at the top and click on CMYK. This will open up your color picker here and allow you to pick an actual color to use within the space. And I could maybe even borrow from one of the colors that's in the space here if I wanted to. I'm going to pick this kind of gold color for the time being. And now I have one area of my paragraph styles. So I could go ahead and create this paragraph style here if I wanted to. Selecting on the text that I've created, let's come up to Window, and let's open up our Styles window for paragraph styles. And you'll notice that I already have a few different styles inside the space here. The default is going to be this paragraph style up here, but when I see this plus sign next to this paragraph style, I know that there's been changes made to the style. And of course, we just made a few changes within the typeface, the color, the sizing, so on and so forth. So now that I've actually made some changes to this, I want to create a new paragraph style. And if I click on the top right here, I can go to New Paragraph Style. It's going to ask me what the style name is. I'm going to put in Header Example. And of course, I can always go into my basic character format to make any changes to this. I could go into the character color, any of these areas here to make additional changes. And you can do that at any point within the design. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. Now, I've created that paragraph style. We'll see it here. But I still need to apply that paragraph style to this text that I have highlighted. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on that header example there for this text that's highlighted. So I have one of my 3 levels of hierarchy here. Now I need to go in and create the subheaders and the body copy. So for this, I'm going to use my type tool, and I'm going to create 3 different text boxes. And I'm actually going to bring down a guide for myself here. So if you don't see your rulers inside your space, make sure to go to View and Show Rulers. That should allow you to see your rulers here. And if I click into the ruler, I can drag down some sort of guideline for my space here to sit within the actual document. I'm just going to decrease the size of this image frame here a little bit. Okay, so now that I have that guideline inside this space, let's go back to my type tool, and I'm going to click and drag within my grid to create one column that fits perfectly within that column going to the bottom of my margins, okay? And I'm going to actually create 2 additional text boxes over here as well. So it's creating a second in the second column and a 3rd text box in the 3rd column here. Now if I come back to my black arrow tool, I can see that I have 3 text boxes here. And I can actually link these together so that they are all going to act as one text box, and that is called tethering your text boxes. So you'll notice that when I have this text box selected, there's this little white box down here at the bottom. And if I click on that, if I click on that white box, it prompts me to link it to another text box. So when I click on this little white box down here, I can come up to my next text box. In this case, it's the one right next to it. I can click in that, and now these 2 are linked together. They are tethered. So I'm going to do this to my 3rd text box as well, coming down here to the bottom right-hand corner of my 2nd text box, linking that to my 3rd text box. Now when I select on my 1st text box, I can use my placeholder text to fill out the text within all 3 of these. So I can either right-click and go down to, let's see where we're at here. I want to go, let's see, did that work there? Oh, sorry, I was missing it up here. Fill with placeholder text. So right-clicking, going to fill with placeholder text. You can also come up here to type, and you can go into fill with placeholder text here. Either way, right-clicking or going up to type and fill with placeholder text. Once I click that, it's going to fill all 3 of these boxes because we've already tethered these with this placeholder text. So now I can go through and start to separate this content and create these subheaders and body copy. This first sentence here is kind of throwing me off with the spacing, so I'm just going to erase that and bring this up to the top of the document here. Now, in order to work with this a little bit more accurately, I want to be able to see my special characters within the space. So again, coming up to type here, I want to come all the way down to the bottom and go to show hidden characters. That's going to allow me to see where I have paragraph breaks, and this will help me to create these paragraph styles. Because remember, everywhere you have a paragraph break is where your new paragraph styles are going to be utilized. So if I just try to create a paragraph style for this right here, it's going to apply it to all of this text because it's not identifying any paragraph breaks. I guess there's actually one right here and one right here. But that's not necessarily where we want those. So to create our own paragraph breaks, I'm going to come into the text here, and I'm just going to choose a couple of these words that are going to introduce my subheader. So I'm going to use this first sentence here. I'm going to come in between these two words, and I'm going to use the return key. That is going to create a hard return for me. I can see that there's a paragraph icon here, so it's letting me know that that is a new paragraph. So here I'm going to go back and create a capital so that that is standardized there. And I'm going to go ahead and come down here into the space, and let's create a couple more paragraphs to use here. So let's come down to maybe this area here. Return key. Oops, too many returns. I still want to use a capital for the initial start of that, and then I want to use another return maybe here inside the space as well, creating another capital. Let's do another paragraph return right here, and use another return right here, creating a capital, and let's use another one down here as well. So I'm going to use a hard return there, and another hard return here, and I'm really just kind of placing these within some breaks of the text. And we'll see why here in a second. So the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go ahead and set my body copy for everything. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of my text by using Command A, or you can always go up to Edit and select all with your type tool. And let's use that same Helvetica New. So I'm going to type into the actual properties here, my Helvetica New. For my body copy, I'm just going to use Helvetica New Regular. And I'm going to use a point size of about 10 point for this. I would say your body copy should range anywhere no smaller than 8 point and no larger than 12 point. 10 point is always a good safe bet there. And then I am going to increase my leading here a little bit. I'm going to bump that up to say 13 within the space. I'm going to leave the tracking the way that it is, and I'm going to leave my paragraph alignment the way that it is down here as well. So this is now the setup for my body copy. And actually, let's go into the color here. And I'm just going to make this, instead of 100% black, just make this 90% black so it's not quite so dominant within the space. And let's create a new paragraph style now that we have our body copy. So let's go back up to our new paragraph style in our paragraph styles. Here we're going to title this Body Copy Example. And I'll hit OK. And again, we're going to go ahead and click on the body copy example so that we get that assigned paragraph style for all of this copy. Now I have two levels of hierarchy, so here's where I want to go in and create that middle ground for my subheaders. So we've already created some paragraph breaks here within the space. So by selecting on this first paragraph that we have created here, I'm just going to make some minor changes. So here I'm going to use the Helvetica New still. Maybe I want to use a different style of that, maybe medium italic here, just to make it stand out a little bit more within the space, or potentially even bold italic if it works there as well. I think I'll stick with the medium italic here. Well, let's keep the bold italic for now. Let's keep the bold italic. Let's maybe bump it up 1 point size here, and I could increase my lighting if I needed to a little bit there as well. And let's change the color of this here as well. So here I'm going to come into my fill, come back over to my color. Remember, it's the default maybe black, but we can click on the top here to go to CMYK. And here I'm going to go ahead and choose another color within this space. I'm going to kind of go for this gold coloring here again, but I'm going to make it much darker within this space, almost like a dark brown. And now if I click back out of this, we can see that I have this visual hierarchy starting to be used here. And I can now go through and start to apply these to these different areas where I have this subheader copy. So we've created another subheader down here by creating hard breaks. Now let's look at this. We can see that within this body copy, I have a paragraph break here and a paragraph break here. So by placing the cursor inside this sentence between these two paragraph breaks, whoops, we actually forgot to do something here. Let's select this initial text up at the top and make sure that we have, oh, we didn't create our paragraph style. I apologize. Let's create our paragraph style for this here. Let's select that subheader copy that we've already created and go to new paragraph style. Again, subheader example. I'll hit OK, and I'm going to apply that subheader example. So now coming down to the paragraph here where we have our additional subheader which we have created, we can simply put our cursor anywhere between these two paragraph breaks, and if we click on the subheader example, it will automatically generate that within the space. So basically it's looking for anywhere where we have these two paragraph breaks. Here I have another two paragraph breaks. I'll go into subheader example. I have another one down here. Go into subheader example, and I believe I have another one over here as well. This one's getting a little long inside the space, so I'm going to actually clean this up. I'm going to bring this back up to the previous line here. And this one I'm going to go ahead and, whoops, break right here by putting a paragraph, a hard break, capital. And back here, I will select my subheader example as well. So I have my subheaders, I have my body copy, I have my headers inside the space. My subheaders and my body copy are using placeholder text. Now I can go through and finalize this. So one thing I want to do is, I'm not really in love with the color of this subheader example. So the beauty of these paragraph styles is that I can now make these global changes. So let's say I wanted to change the color of that subheader example, and maybe even the sizing. It feels a little large to me. I'm going to come back over to my paragraph style. I'm going to double click into my subheader. And this is where I can make overall global changes. So I'm actually going to bump this back down to 10 point. I think it's getting a little large, and because I'm using that bold italic, I don't think it needs to be so large within the space. And I'm actually going to kick this back to 13 point leading as well. For the color of this, I'm going to come down to the character color and go ahead and you can double click into the box here and maybe just bringing this up into the space a little bit. Maybe even using a different variation of color if you wanted to as well. Maybe we're bringing something that has more of a gold, or excuse me, a greenish tone to it potentially. Something like that, or actually maybe even more of a bronzish tone here. Let's go with that there. And when I hit OK, it should make those changes globally. Now, the other thing that I'm noticing is my spacing here. I want a little bit more spacing between these subheaders. So again, I'm going to double click into my subheader here, and I'm going to come into indents and spacing. And this is where I want to create a little bit of space before and after these subheaders. So I want to bump up the spacing here before each one of these, and I also want to bump up the spacing after each one of these as well. You can input that, or you can simply click on the up and down arrows. I'm going to make my space before slightly larger than my space after here. And we can also see that we have different alignment options that we can use if you wanted to use justified or centered alignment, whatever. You can make all those changes here within the space. Once you've made all those changes, then you can hit OK. Now the last thing I'm noticing is there's a bunch of hyphens here. So I'm going to come into hyphenation, and I'm just going to kick this down to fewer hyphens so that there's less hyphens there. If I hit OK, this is starting to look pretty good. Starting to get some nice breakdown of information here. I can clearly see that there's 3 levels of hierarchy, and I can continue to use those paragraph styles within all of the content within the space. So the last thing I'm going to do here is, I have this image of this isolated headphone, and I want to use a text wrap to have that text wrap around that image. Now, looking at this image here, this is still a square box for this frame. So there's really nothing to identify the shape within the space. So we need to create some sort of shape that's going to follow the line of this headphone. So you can do this in multiple different ways. I'm just going to grab my pencil tool here. And this does not need to be perfect. I'm just going to kind of use my pencil tool to outline around the side of the headphone here, going all the way outside of the text box. And I'm going to come back to that shape so that I can close that off within the space. So now that I have that shape, it doesn't have any attributes to it, so I can't actually see that within the space, but it's there. And now that I have that shape, I can select on the shape itself and hold the Shift key to select the text box that I want to interact with that shape. So selecting the text box and the shape that we've created, I can now come up here to Window. I can go to Text Wrap, and you'll notice that it brings up these options for me at the top. The most common one here is Wrap Around Object Shape, and we've created this object. And when I click on that, you'll notice that it automatically wraps around that shape that I've created. Now, of course, if I move that shape or change the positioning or sizing of that shape, the text is going to move within that space as well. So now that we have that text wrapped around here, I want to kind of go through and just finesse this text a little bit more. So I can see that I have this orphan up here, right? This word that's by itself connected to the previous text box here. So I'm actually going to go through here, because this is placeholder text, I don't necessarily need everything inside here. I'm just going to actually erase this back to the spot here, put a period, and use some hard returns to get that subheader up to my next box here. Now, again, I can see that there's another orphan over here as well. So there's a couple different ways we could go through this. We could either start erasing a couple areas of text here if we needed to, something like that. But actually, in this case, I am going to insert some more text. So I am going to go ahead and just make a copy here of maybe one of my sentences. I'm going to place this at the end over here as well. And the main reason I'm doing that is because I don't want every single one of my subheaders to sit at the top here, because that's not typically how it's going to work with your text, right? You may not necessarily, well, you're definitely not going to have the opportunity to just erase text within the space, because typically there's going to be actual text you're going to use. So it's not always going to be perfectly sitting up at the top. So I just want to kind of stagger those within the space. Now what I do see that's going on here is I have this red box that's now showing a plus sign in this text box, letting me know that the text is actually going beyond this text box. If I bring this down further, there's actually more text inside the space. So there's a couple things I could do here. I could either create an additional text box, maybe on my next page over, and I could link those together. So coming back into this one, clicking on that here in the bottom right hand corner of this text box. Oops. I could come back into my next text box and it will continue that sequence. And of course I could always put in some hard returns here to get that over to the next area. Or of course you could just erase that content and create some new text boxes there as well. Either way, we want to start to look for that consistency. And you want to make sure that, again, you have 3 levels of hierarchy: our headers, our subheaders, and our body copy. The subheaders and the body copy can use the placeholder text, but the subheaders within the space need to use that actual text. Making sure that all of our text boxes are fitting perfectly within our grid. Again, if you wanted this to span 2 columns, you can certainly do that. Just make sure that it spans all the way through to that next column, stopping before the gutter, and continuing with the image placement, text placement for your interior spreads. Now, once you have completed all of the cover and the interior spreads, you're going to want to save this out as your InDesign document. Going to File, Save As, saving this as a working InDesign document. And you also want to export this with all of our printer markings as well. So in order to save this out and prepare it for print, we're going to go into Adobe PDF Presets, High Quality Print. When we select on the High Quality Print, we're going to designate where we want to save this. I'll go ahead and hit Save. I already have one, so I'll replace it. And there's a couple things you need to do here within your Adobe PDF dialog box here. The first is making sure that you are exporting this as spreads, not pages. I want to see these as full spreads within the space. So toggling the spreads option, then you're going to come down to marks and bleeds on the left-hand column here. And I want you to click on the All Printers Marks. This is going to give you all of the printers marks necessary for your PDF. And we're also going to use the document bleed settings that we have created. So we're going to click on that here as well. And we're going to go ahead and go to Export. And once you have exported that, pull this up here. you should have a document that looks something like this here. So we can see on the last spread that we just worked with, we can see our two facing pages as a spread, not as individual pages. The guides are obviously gone, but we can see all the placement and hierarchy that we have positioned. We have our bleed lines and our trim lines. We have our color bars up at the top, registration marks for the printers, and our information in regard to each one of these pages as well. So make sure that you are saving this out as a high quality print, that you are using the saving these as spreads, and you are using all of the marks and bleeds for the printer information, as well as using the bleed document settings. Once you have saved that out, you will take that PDF and upload it to Canvas for review. So that concludes the tutorial for the interior spreads of the brochure. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.